Hi, everyone. So this is going to be the third of my Go AI talks. Last year we talked about why it's hard to create an AI, and then Google made me look like an idiot a couple of months later when they built an AI that would destroy a professional player for the first time. So that actually happened in October, but it wasn't announced until January or February this year. And since then, the AlphaGo team challenged Lee Sedol to a match. Lee Sedol is the best player over the last decade, probably. There are a couple of players now that might be a little bit stronger, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But he's definitely had the most consistent performance over the last 10 years. So this is sort of like the showdown with Kasparov. I mean, he's pretty much the best player in the world. Since the match in October, a couple of things happened. One is Fan Wei, who is the pro that was beaten by AlphaGo last year. He's actually part of the Google DeepMind team, and so he's been playing AlphaGo a lot and helping it get better and also learning from it. And he has moved up in the world ranking from about 633rd to the top 300 players. So he's actually picked up some tricks from the program. That's probably what's going to be happening in the future. Now that it seems AlphaGo is extremely strong, many pros are going to want to be able to play with it to help them study and improve. So the match for March was AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol, and there was $1 million on the line. If Lee won, he got to keep the money, and if Google won, they were donating it to charity. Lee actually would get $150,000 even if he lost. So, you know, it's worth the week of work. Here he is playing the first move of the match. And here's AlphaGo. In the time between these two matches against pros, the Google team had done a few things to make AlphaGo stronger. One of the things they did is build a custom ASIC. So they designed what they're calling a tensor processing unit. This is a custom ASIC that can plug into a server rack. It actually goes into the hardware or the hard drive slot of a server rack, and it implements in hardware their deep learning algorithms. They said that this gives them about 10 times the performance that they could get with conventional hardware. So this helps AlphaGo learn much more quickly. They also have AlphaGo constantly playing against itself. It can play around 1 million games a day against itself and try to improve. So the way that works is that they make a change to the neural network that controls it. Actually, they don't do it. It's part of the algorithm. So the neural network sort of changes itself, and then it plays against the old version, and you find out which one is better. And if it's better, you keep the new one, and you keep going in that direction. So it's been doing a lot of that and trying to improve. David Silver is one of the members of the AlphaGo team. This is him giving a presentation. I really wish I could get my hands on this presentation. I haven't been able to find it anywhere. I've just seen a few slides from it. But he is showing here how much AlphaGo improved between the matches. So these are the other top programs in the world, Zen and Crazy Stone. AlphaGo that played Fan Wei in October is around this strength, which is close to the top humans over here. And the new AlphaGo is around 4 stones stronger than the older one. So the version that played Lee Sedol could give the older version a 4-stone handicap and beat it. That is pretty ridiculous. This may or may not be accurate. Here we have the top of the human range, and you can see AlphaGo is pretty far above that. Maybe it's not quite that strong. These are just from play results against other programs, mostly not against humans. So this might not be completely accurate, but you get the idea. The new version is much stronger than the previous version. So as you probably already knew, AlphaGo won the match. It played Lee Sedol 5 games and won 4 of them by resignation. And so here we're going to take a look at how that happened. First, a quick recap for people who may have missed the other talks. The basics of the game: players take turns putting stones on the board. The stones don't move. The stones can be captured and taken off the board if they get completely surrounded. The way that capture works is that you have to surround the stones on the orthogonal points. So the squares marked here are called liberties, and if a group of stones loses all of its liberties, then it comes off the board. These stones are in Atari. That means they are about to be captured. It's kind of like check in chess, except that in Go, you let some stones go. Sacrifice is actually a common technique. So each of these white groups is about to die, and if it's black's move, black could play and capture any one of them. Black could not, of course, capture all 4 at once. Each captured stone is worth a point at the end of the game. Stones can also escape Atari, so if it was white's turn, you could add another stone to the group. Groups that are connected horizontally and vertically are considered one unit, and they live or die as one. So if we play a white stone and extend these groups, then they each have 2 liberties now, and black cannot capture any of them immediately on the next move. In Go, it's very important that a group can make 2 eyes. Most of the fighting in the game is about whether groups can make 2 eyes or not. Here's a very simple case of 2 eyes. White has 2 separate pieces of territory that are completely surrounded. Once a group has done that, that group can never be killed. The reason for that is that you're not allowed to commit suicide. So this white group here is completely surrounded on the outside by black. But if black were to try to capture the white stones, black would need to fill these 2 liberties on the inside. And when black played on one of those points, the black stone that was just played would be already surrounded and dead. That would be a suicidal move, and so it's illegal. So if you have 2 eyes like this, there's no way that your group can be captured. And a lot of the strategy of the game revolves around that. So I'm going to talk about the games. Most of the insights I have here into the games are not my own. I am not strong enough to criticize Lee Sedol or AlphaGo. Most of these comments come from different reviews that I looked at after the match. Michael Redmond is a 9-dan professional. He's the strongest player from the West. He's the only Westerner to ever reach the top rank of 9-dan. Ting Li is the president of the European Go Foundation, and Myungwon Kim is a pro that did some commentary for the AGA. So the 3 of them looked at the games, and I took some of the comments from each of their reviews, things that I thought you would find interesting. It's kind of important to point out that since AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol here, it's kind of hard to criticize AlphaGo's moves, right? Since it may be stronger than the best player in the world, moves that look like mistakes to us may not really be mistakes. So you have to sort of take everything that the reviewers say with a grain of salt. Are you seeing this? You're not seeing this Go game.
No, just a green box and a gray box on top of the presentation.
Let me get that shared on top of this. All right, how about now?
Yep.
Okay, so here's the first game with Lee Sedol. So in this game, AlphaGo is white. And Lee starts out with a pretty normal opening up to this point, but then at move 7, Lee plays a very unusual move. This move is not necessarily bad, but it's not a move that you would ever find in another game with professionals. So they probably consider it just slightly worse than the moves they actually play. This is probably coming from a misunderstanding of how AlphaGo works. Most AIs have an opening database. They have a lot of fixed data that they use to play the first part of the game. And Lee's probably hoping to get off the beaten path so that AlphaGo won't know what to do. That's not really likely to work against AlphaGo because AlphaGo doesn't work that way. AlphaGo has a neural network and takes a much more holistic approach to the game. So playing unusual moves probably won't confuse it. So over here, both players are sort of looking to fight. White is AlphaGo. So AlphaGo is creating a group in this area. Lee's sort of mapping out some space on the right, trying to get some territory set up. And AlphaGo goes ahead and decides that it wants to fight right off the bat. All right, so this move is a very good move for the fight that's going to happen. Splits these 2 black stones apart. White's gaining some strength in this area. At this point, we see a move. This move isn't that strange, but it's the kind of move we see later from AlphaGo. There's a proverb in Go that says that the 4th line of the board is the golden line. All right, so we count this edge line as the first. So this line here with the black stones on it is the 4th line. The idea of the golden line is that if you have stones on this line and your opponent's stones are outside of it, then the territory you're getting near the edge is larger than the influence your opponent is getting toward the center. So you're getting more value out of your stones. If your stones are on this line and your opponent's stones are on the inside of them, the territory they get is smaller, and it's not worth as much as the influence you're getting from your stones facing the center. So whichever side your opponent is on, the 4th line tends to be good for you. AlphaGo doesn't appear to believe that as much as many players do. So we'll see that coming up in a couple of the games. But here, AlphaGo pushes, and Lee just backs up, and this territory is looking pretty solid. So AlphaGo has certainly given up some points here, and we have to see if AlphaGo can get enough in exchange for that to make it worthwhile. So the idea here is to attack these two stones, and AlphaGo prevents them from running into the center. Black fights back, and AlphaGo plays a really excellent sequence here, peeping, forcing black to connect, and then cutting black apart. So this is actually a pretty scary situation for black. I don't think Lee is rattled by this, but a mere mortal like me would be pretty scared at this point. If these black stones get captured, the game is pretty much over. So he has to make these stones survive, but also without making white too strong on the outside. If white gets too strong on the outside, then he'll probably lose the game anyway. So there's this juggling act between keeping your stones safe and not helping out the opponent too much. So Lee has to play some moves on the inside to make his stones safer, and he does that. And then he cuts white apart. These three stones are really important. If they get captured, all the black stones here would be connected, and black would actually be so powerful that the game would just be over. So white has to keep these stones out in the open, and the fighting from here gets kind of complicated, so we're not going to look at that in detail. After the end of this sequence, about, let's see, right about here, white has this long, weak group. This group isn't quite alive, but it's not in immediate danger of dying. Black's group is surrounded, but it actually has just enough strength that it is alive. And the exchange looks like it was fairly even. One of the things that came out of this fight is that there's a huge territory available over here. If black gets a move in this area, black can play in the corner and survive, and this large white potential area will evaporate mostly. If white gets to play over here first, then white's going to get a lot of territory. So this is a really important issue on the board right now, but both players have more urgent things to worry about at the moment. So one of the really important concerns is who's going to get the initiative at the end of this exchange to get back to that corner. And you'll see that they play a lot of moves before they manage to get back there. So AlphaGo needs to keep the white group safe and keep it out in the open. And black has decided this group is alive. There are actually, this group needs two eyes to live, or it can connect to a living group. So right now there's sort of a potential eye here. Black can maybe surround a point in this area, and there's a potential eye on the top edge. If white tries to take away this potential eye, black can play here and connect to his friendly stones on the side, and this black group will be safe. If white prevents that connection by playing a move like this, then black can play here, threatening to capture these two stones. White will have to protect them. Black can play here, creating an eye, and there's enough room at the top here for an eye, so the sequence would go something like this. And now black has an eye here and an eye at the top and cannot be killed. So that group is just on the verge of death, but it can't quite be killed. When a strong player sees a situation like this in Go, they save it for later. They put it in their back pocket, they keep it in mind, and they try to find a way to use those forcing moves, the sequence that they know their opponent's going to have to play, to their advantage later on. For now, AlphaGo needs to make this white group stronger, and actually it plays a really great move. This jump move here surprised most of the spectators. This is actually a really nice sacrifice technique here. AlphaGo is playing these two stones so that it can get some more strength on this group here, actually, to the right. First, we have to exchange a few moves in this area because these stones cannot be allowed to die. So AlphaGo has to keep them out of trouble. And then AlphaGo comes back and forces its way down the side. And this is about making this group safer, and it's also about threatening this potential territory on the right. Black has sort of mapped out this right side, but with a strong white wall like this nearby, AlphaGo will be able to jump into this area without any trouble. At this point in the game, Lee thought that he was winning. So he played this move to capture these two stones. That may have been a little bit slow. Maybe that wasn't big enough. Maybe he should have played a move more like this and try to take more and hope that these white stones can't escape and live in this area or cause enough trouble to hurt him. But he thought he was winning the game. He also thought that he would be able to outcalculate AlphaGo in the endgame. The endgame of a Go game is extremely complicated, and he thought that he would be able to gain some ground at the end. So at this point, there are two really big things happening. If black gets a move right here, black would solidify this lower right corner, and it would also be threatening the entire white group because white would be sort of eyeless. White doesn't have any clear eyes. White has almost an eye here, and there's room to make more eyes. But if black plays over here, white's going to have to play moves right now to make eyes. And after that, black will probably get another move to go up and take the left corner. That can't be allowed to happen. So AlphaGo has to get into this corner right now, and does. After that, we play a few more exchanges. Actually, at this point, AlphaGo plays a move that most of the professionals thought was too slow. This was not big enough. But the reason AlphaGo played it is that AlphaGo decided it had won the game at this point. So that's up to you to decide whether this is a good move or not. There are bigger moves on the board, but AlphaGo thought this just sort of locked down the game. Lee goes ahead and attacks this group in the lower left corner, and AlphaGo has to make this stone safe. He has to get a life of some kind in this area. If all these white stones die, the game's over. So he's got to survive somewhere in this neighborhood. AlphaGo actually plays a really nice sequence. This is not a sequence that you would find in any other game. This sequence is specifically suited for this exact position. So when white cuts here and then sacrifices a stone to make life, so these two white stones are going to die, but the stones on the left survive. So black doesn't get a huge corner. White gets some points in this area. And actually, black ended up with this move, so now it's white has the initiative. AlphaGo gets to make the next move somewhere else on the board. So this is a really good sequence for white. And it's not the kind of thing that it could have gotten out of a move database or any of the games it looked at when it was training. This is something that it came up with on its own. So this is a good sequence. And now we see AlphaGo's brilliant move that will win the game for it. Remember, we have a forcing sequence up here because this black group is almost dead. So white cuts the black group off. Black is forced to make life for his group, so he's going to go ahead and make the eye that we saw earlier. So black can get an eye here and an eye on the edge. And now AlphaGo invades the side territory. Lee was shocked when AlphaGo played this move. This was a very surprising move. This black area looks very solid and strong. All these stones are pretty close together. There aren't any white stones in here. This is a pretty strong territory. So when AlphaGo plays in here, it's pretty surprising. Lee attempts to seal AlphaGo in, and AlphaGo moves over in this direction. Now the obvious thing to do would be to play here. If you do that, AlphaGo is going to go ahead and play underneath. Black will try to block him in. This move threatens to capture the black stone here, and so black will connect. White will finish off this black stone. It can't run away because the edge of the board is in the way. Black forces the capture. And now these two white stones can actually kill this one if black doesn't play another move. So black would actually be forced to finish these two stones off. But then at that point, white can play here, and this whole area belongs to white now. So this stone has just sort of died quietly. White has a huge corner, and the game is over. So this is not an acceptable way for black to play. Lee would actually wind up with the territory he started with, basically, right? He gets to keep what he had sketched out, but while he's protecting that, white has gained 20, 25 points, maybe even more than that. So this is not a viable solution. Instead, Lee has to play here. AlphaGo threatens to escape, so black seals it in. And now white plays this jump. This is actually threatening to play over here and make life, so Lee prevents that. But then AlphaGo shows its real objective, which is to sacrifice these three stones. Lee goes ahead and captures them, but in exchange, AlphaGo gets to capture the black stones here and erase a good chunk of this, what used to be potential black territory. So this sequence, nobody saw this coming. It goes from looking like a black area here to black losing this whole top half of it, white getting to capture these stones and actually make this part white territory, and black winds up with this small little chunk of space left over. Black actually has to play another move even, so Lee winds up playing here, and AlphaGo keeps the initiative to go take the huge move in the corner that we've been waiting for. So at this point, AlphaGo's lead is insurmountable. There's no way that Lee can win this game anymore. So he was pretty shocked when this happened. It's one thing to see Fan Wei get beaten by a computer when he's number 633 in the world. When you're having, one of the very top players in the world, that's a whole different story. So this is not the same AlphaGo that we saw in the earlier matches. Even I am strong enough to tell the difference there. When I look at the moves of this AI, it's like looking at a top pros game. You can see how beautiful they are, but you would never come up with them on your own. It's pretty impressive. So in game 2, Lee is white, and we get to see AlphaGo take the initiative, right? When you're black, you're supposed to sort of take the initiative in the game and control the game. And we really didn't see much of that in the match with Fan Wei. AlphaGo played kind of passively and then waited for opportunities to attack. This is not this is not the same attitude from AlphaGo. AlphaGo is much more aggressive in this game. So AlphaGo goes ahead and plays this sequence. White answers. What we normally see here is for black to play something like this and protect his stones. The stones can be attacked if you don't do that. So if black leaves, as AlphaGo actually did, we might expect white to play a move around here somewhere to try to put pressure on these stones. It's a little surprising that AlphaGo leaves. Pros never leave after these 3 moves. But as you'll see, AlphaGo is very creative in this game, and it plays a lot of moves that pros never would. So here, AlphaGo forces a response and then jumps into the corner. Again, this is kind of weird. Usually black would play some kind of move in this area. But AlphaGo jumps into the corner and plays out a sequence that by itself is common. So this sequence of stones in the corner is not real surprising. But at the end of it, AlphaGo gets to put this stone down. And because of the order that AlphaGo did things, AlphaGo actually has come out ahead here. Because this corner's already been settled in a specific way, AlphaGo can play the perfect move. If AlphaGo had played on this line earlier, then this stone might have wound up in the wrong spot. After this sequence, maybe this stone isn't just right, but the move that AlphaGo winds up with is just perfect. Lee actually felt like he was behind in the game already. This is very early for a player like that to be behind in a game. AlphaGo goes ahead and sketches out the top half of the board, and then we get to see its first truly unique move. This move, most spectators thought this was a mistake. All right, this is not a move you would ever see. And one of the reasons for that is that we talked about how the 4th line is the golden line. The obvious thing for white to do is just play on the 4th line, and the area that white's sketching out here is worth more than the influence black is getting on the outside. There were really only 2 players watching the game that understood this move right away. Fan Wei, who plays AlphaGo all the time, said that after a minute he realized this was a beautiful move. And Lee Sedol realized it immediately. As soon as the stone was played on the board, he got up and left the table, went to the bathroom and splashed water on his face. And then he walked around for 15 minutes before he played his next move. So he realized that this was actually a brilliant move. The common way to answer this would be to play underneath, and AlphaGo's aim seems to be to pull these 2 stones on the left out and use this stone to help support them eventually. Only really top-level players can do that kind of thing, play a move on one side of the board that actually is affecting this other side. I don't pretend to understand the details of how that move works, but Lee apparently realized what AlphaGo was up to and decided to resist by playing here instead. So he plays here, AlphaGo moves out into the center, white plays this move, and then AlphaGo goes about its plan. So it plays this move to put pressure on these white stones. We have these 4 stones, and once black connects these together, these stones are under some pressure, they could die, and AlphaGo is attempting to pull these stones out so that white won't just capture them and get a territory in this area. So white puts some pressure on them, and now the rest of this sequence is sort of an unexpected thing for professionals. White cuts the black stones apart, and black squirms out into the open, gets a little space. White goes ahead and captures these 2 stones. They can't escape now. So this group is now safe, the white group. Black needs to get its group out of trouble. So AlphaGo goes ahead and captures a stone and then jumps to here. And now when you look at the board, after this exchange, AlphaGo comes back and shores up the top. Every move that AlphaGo has played in the first part of this game works together perfectly. These stones are in just the right places to support this group if it decides to run in this direction. These stones are in the right place to support it if it has to run in this direction. So white can really only chase it one way or the other. Black has sketched out a lot of territory up here at the top, and there's potential territory in this area. So AlphaGo's whole strategy has just sort of come together in this moment. So there are a few more exchanges here, and then Lee needs to do something about the large area at the top, right here. So if Black's allowed to have that whole area, then AlphaGo will be too far ahead. So Lee jumps in. Now, most players would answer this move somewhat directly. All right, bad players might play here. A pro would probably play around here somewhere and try to either surround this and force it to live small on the side, or maybe kill the white stone if you're really lucky. But AlphaGo plays away from the stone. Ting Lee, when reviewing this game, said, this is like someone broke into your house and wants to have a fight with you, and instead you go and make a cup of coffee, and then you come back to fight. That's kind of a weird thing to do. So AlphaGo moves away. Lee takes the opportunity to make this white group a little stronger, attaching to this stone and then jumping out. AlphaGo now plays some forcing moves over here that threaten to destroy this territory, and so white has to answer them. And AlphaGo has now made this strong wall that it's going to use to attack the white group. So when it plays in the middle of the white group now, there's really not much that Lee can do. Actually playing away from the fight first made AlphaGo so much stronger in this area that Lee's stones are in a lot of trouble. So Lee answers, AlphaGo pushes through the middle here, connects up his stones, white connects, and then black threatens to cut off this stone. Now white would like to connect here because that keeps this area from being black territory. But if white does that, black will probably play a move somewhere in this area and kill the entire white group. The whole group has no eyes yet and probably can't get 2 eyes. So AlphaGo will just kill the whole white group and win the game. So instead, Lee has to escape, and AlphaGo gets to cut off the white stone and keep the entire side. So Lee jumped into this side and got hardly anything out of it, right? The side got smaller by a couple of points maybe. And this is just too much. AlphaGo has too much territory at the top. AlphaGo has not made any mistakes in this game, and Lee has just fallen too far behind. So that's 2-0 for AlphaGo. In the third game, Lee decided to adopt a different strategy. This time, AlphaGo is white, and Lee really wants to fight. So he plays this opening, which is leading to a fight. He's sketching out so much territory that white's just going to have to dive into the middle of it and try to do something to reduce the potential there. It's kind of amusing that AlphaGo just goes toe-to-toe with him here. AlphaGo plays this move. Many players would back off to something like this, but AlphaGo actually is trying to pick a fight as well. AlphaGo backs up all the way to here, and it's as if it's saying, come on, jump in this area, we'll fight, let's go. A player might jump in here and white jumps out, and then they get into a complicated fight. So AlphaGo is not at all afraid to fight. That's one thing about playing the computer, right? It never gets tired, it never gets nervous, and it certainly isn't intimidated by your world ranking. All right, so Lee has sketched out an enormous area over here, and AlphaGo has to jump in to keep it from getting too big. Lee has decided he's going to go all out in this fight. So when AlphaGo jumps out to here, Lee plays this move. This is a move saying, I'm going to kill you. All right, there are a lot of ways that black could play here that would be less aggressive, less forceful. You could let the white group sort of run out here while you make some territory on the side. You can, there are different ways to push this group around and try to benefit from it. But Lee, with this move, is saying, I'm just coming to kill you. AlphaGo handles this amazingly well. So AlphaGo pushes through this gap. Black keeps his stones apart. AlphaGo squirms through the hole there, pushes out into the open, turns this corner, which puts some pressure on this corner group, and black has to protect it. And then AlphaGo is just going to move out into the center here gracefully. So jumps out this way, black blocks, white pushes down, which causes black to play here. AlphaGo jumps out into the center and then plays this move. And the flow of these moves, if you're not really a Go player, it may be hard to appreciate, but these moves just look so smooth and easy. And if you're actually in that situation, it would not feel that way at all. There are many ways that this fight could go. There are a lot of different variations that you have to keep in mind. But the moves that come out on the board just look like AlphaGo just sort of walks out into the middle of the board and his stones are getting out into the open and not really in trouble. At this point, most players would get the white stones out into the open farther, or possibly play here and try to put a little pressure on these 3 stones, maybe threaten to capture these. But AlphaGo finds a better move. AlphaGo actually plays down here. This is a really, really good move. It's putting pressure on this group. It's threatening to ruin whatever potential black had here. It's also threatening these 3 stones. If white gets too strong around here, these 3 stones are just going to wind up dying. And then this group will be alive and happy. So Lee has sort of a juggling act to do. He needs to keep these 3 stones alive, but he also needs to try to keep this potential from being ruined. And AlphaGo does a great job of putting him on the ropes here. So AlphaGo pushes up, jumps underneath. Black is sort of squirming out underneath. This fight's really complicated and pretty hard to follow. So I'm not going to go into all the details of it. But up through about here, what's happened is that white has a weak group. This group doesn't have 2 eyes yet, but it's out into the open. This group doesn't have 2 eyes, but it's out in the open. This one's actually in a lot better shape than the first group, probably. And then there are 2 black groups that are in trouble. This large black group has no eyes and actually is in danger of being completely encircled. And this black group's in danger. So both players are juggling weak groups and trying to keep their stones out of trouble. Black jumps out in the open. White plays this move. At this point, Lee's actually in a lot of trouble. These groups are under pressure, and white's in a much better position than black is. Here, Lee is trying to connect his stones to this group, and if he does that, that'll take a lot of the heat off of him. Most players would play here. This is probably the strongest move in this position. And then black would have to sort of run away while white chases and generally gives him a hard time. So if these are not real moves, but let's say black jumped out here, white jumps out, black jumps out again, maybe white can play a move like this and just sort of finish off this whole group. You can see that as black runs away, it's going to be very difficult to get this group out of trouble without endangering the one above. So that's what most players would do in this situation. At this point, AlphaGo, I think, decided that the game is over, and it didn't need to be that aggressive. So it plays this move and lets Lee go and connect to its group over on the side. And it just has decided that it's going to get enough points in this area that it doesn't matter if black's group lives or not. And this is just the surest route to victory. So they continue to fight, and what winds up happening is that AlphaGo sketches out an enormous area at the bottom of the board right here. So AlphaGo's saying, this is all mine. If AlphaGo gets all this territory, there's no way that black can win this game. So at some point, Lee has to jump into it, and he does. AlphaGo plays a few more moves over there and lets Lee get another move down in this area, and then AlphaGo attacks. So at this point, the fight gets too complicated to explain, but the upshot is, at the end of this fight, AlphaGo winds up with this territory completely locked down, and we get into what's called a co-fight over here for the rest of this area. And at this stage, the fighting's real complicated, but it comes down to Lee resigning. At this point, these black stones have died, so Lee invaded this large area and was unable to survive in it, and AlphaGo wins the fight, and with that, the game keeps this entire area and actually gets points for all these black stones that died inside of it. So that's actually the end of the match, right? AlphaGo's already won the match. It's a best-of-5 match, and Lee has lost the first 3 games. It's looking bad for humanity at this point. In the 4th game, Lee decides to try something different. He is playing white in this game, and he lets black get a large territory built up. So up to about this point, AlphaGo has built a large black potential area at the top. So this area has a lot of black stones around it. And if AlphaGo can keep this area, AlphaGo will win the game. But there are some white stones in here that aren't really dead. And so the big question is, what's going to happen with this white group? Can it run away? Will part of it get away and black will cut off the rest? You know, exactly how much territory will each player get? So that's the central issue here. White's actually forced to play this move, and black jumps out and tries to make this territory larger while getting a stone down that will help in the fighting to come. So here Lee's desperate in both the game and the match, right? He really wants to win one of these games. He gets this stone down. AlphaGo plays this to sort of strengthen all these stones in the area. Lee cuts these stones apart. This is creating a weakness that he can try to use a little bit later. He actually does have a plan, it seems. AlphaGo does this, and it's starting to look like these stones are in pretty sad shape. Lee creates a weakness by pushing in here. These 2 stones are a weakness because they're almost surrounded. And that's actually what Lee is looking at. So Lee forces here, and then Lee would like to be able to save some of these stones. And he has some forcing moves in this area. He can play here, and black will have to do this to keep white from connecting out into the open. He also has a forcing move here because it threatens to kill these two stones. So black would have to connect. And at that point, he can cut these two stones off. When they run out, white extends, and these stones are almost captured. But it turns out when they go here, they will wind up capturing the two stones on the left before they get captured themselves. So if white plays here, black can finish surrounding the stones, and these four are actually going to die first. So Lee's really close to being able to kill these two stones. What he really wants is to get a forcing move here. If he could get AlphaGo to answer him when he plays this move, maybe play on this side or something, that would make this cut work. But that won't happen. AlphaGo will play here, and this move doesn't really threaten much, so this doesn't quite work. He's really on the verge of something good, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Well, Lee plays this move. This is a completely bizarre move. So I forgot to point it out in the previous game, but when AlphaGo played the really bizarre move that made Lee walk around for 15 minutes, that was a move that it barely even evaluated. There was only a 1 in 10,000 chance that it would even look at that move, but once it did look at it, it quickly realized that it was worth spending some time looking at it further, and it eventually wound up being its favorite move in that position. This move by Lee is actually the same in reverse. AlphaGo thought that this move had only a 1 in 10,000 chance of being played, and probably didn't spend a lot of time evaluating it. So Lee had planned this move in advance, and this is a move that no strong Go player would notice. Playing in between two stones like this, when they're so strong, is a very unusual move because your stone is almost surrounded already. But it turns out this is a brilliant move in this situation. If black plays here, that gives white the forcing move that he wanted, right? White can play this force, and now this move threatens a stone, so black will answer by capturing. White can threaten these two stones, and when black answers, white cuts off the two stones that are the key to the fight, and they can no longer escape. So in this position, these black stones have died, and white has broken into the large black area, right? This game is over because AlphaGo's lost this huge potential that it had. If black answers in a different way, as he did in the game, white's going to play this sequence, and if black captures the stone, white has a plan. White's going to force here, Atari these two stones, cut off the two stones again, so he can't play that way. And if black plays to protect this cutting point, white has another move over here, and this goes no better for black. White actually creates two problems for black with this move. One is that these three stones could be captured. So if black protects the weakness on this side, white will play here, and these three stones cannot escape. They try to run away, and then they die. And if black protects this weakness, then white's going to throw in here and crush these stones and then capture all of them. So either way, white's going to break into this area. And so Lee strikes one blow for the humans. AlphaGo actually sort of goes on tilt at this point. When it realizes that white can get away, it starts playing nonsensical moves for the next 2 or 3 moves that just do it no good. I think it basically can't find a good move that gives it a chance of winning the game, so it's just playing good kind of garbage moves where white might make a mistake or something. And so after a few moves, this game is over. Once Lee has escaped from this area and reduced black's huge territory, there's no comeback for AlphaGo. The final game is actually the least interesting of the games. In this game, they sketch out some territory. Lee actually winds up getting a large territory sketched out here. Let's see, where's the point? Right about here. Yeah, so about here, Lee actually has this whole area. These white stones are all dead. So this lower right corner is worth about 60 points. And the upper right's about 10, and this is about 10. So the lower right's about 40. So he has 60 altogether on the board. And AlphaGo has maybe 30 sketched out that are real territory, but it has these walls facing the center. And so the idea is that AlphaGo must get enough out of those to make up for the territory that he's already given to Lee. That's a pretty tough thing to do, but AlphaGo is up to the challenge. So when Lee tries to reduce white's potential in this area, the move that Lee would like to see is something like this, and Lee would jump out and then sort of create a group in this area. And this is white's big potential area. So once black creates a group here that isn't easily killed, this is going to be very hard to win because this has reduced the potential that white has, and white probably can't catch up in this game. Another way that white could go is to push up and black would jump out. And again, this group is going to be hard to kill, and it's going to manage to reduce this area quite a bit. So this is also bad for AlphaGo. Instead, AlphaGo plays the capping move here and directly attacks this black stone. It turns out that's a really excellent move. Black needs to make life in this area. So black goes ahead and creates a living shape. And AlphaGo is content to just sort of seal it in and build a wall. So after this exchange, black has survived, but white has gotten a wall here facing his potential territory. So AlphaGo's got something like 50 points of almost territory in this area. And so the game is very close. It looks like white's a little bit ahead. And then for the rest of the game, Lee is trying to reduce this territory, and AlphaGo is trying to increase its territory, and they're fighting over 1 and 2 points, which is not very interesting to watch, especially for someone who doesn't understand what's going on with all the moves, like me. But they fight this out all the way to the end, and from this point, AlphaGo's ahead by about 1.5 points, and just maintains that lead all the way to the end of the game. So Lee winds up losing that last game in the end, and really this game is finished, and he's lost by 1.5 points, but he resigned at the end. So the computers appear to be beating us down. I'm trying to find my other window. There we go. All right. I thought it was interesting. This is one of the slides from David Silver's talk about this, this match. And here we see AlphaGo's confidence as the game goes on. So it's pretty hard to see, but this right here is 50% confidence. So the game starts off as even. And you can see that AlphaGo thought it was doing pretty well. The confidence pretty much just goes up. At the point in the first game where AlphaGo made this really excellent invasion, it thought it was up around an 80% chance of winning. And you can see that only got better after that. It's also interesting to look at game 4 where AlphaGo lost. It was feeling good about the game. It had that huge area that it didn't think white could escape from or live in. And then Lee played his brilliant move, and over the next 3 or 4 moves, its chance of winning dropped from 60-65% to about 30. And then as the game continued, it only got worse. AlphaGo started getting desperate and trying crazy things to try to come back and just, falling further behind. So once AlphaGo gets below a 20% chance of winning, it resigns to show respect for its opponent. All right, so after the game, Lee said that he has already improved. The match against AlphaGo has given him new ideas. I would not want to play him. I mean, look at him there. He looks like he's going to kick your ass. He has not lost a match since he played AlphaGo, so he may be right that he actually learned something from the match. He's been kind of on a roll since then. So here's the world ranking currently. We can see Lee is in 4th place. Now this is a ranking that's weighted heavily toward more recent games. He has been the most dominant over the last 10 years, but more recently hasn't been quite as good as a couple of these other players. So AlphaGo, on its very small body of work, has jumped up to 2nd place. And KG is number 1 in the world by a slight margin right now. And that may be the next match for AlphaGo. The AlphaGo team has said that they are interested in having it play against him, and he says he believes he can beat it. Machines can be very strong in many aspects, but still have loopholes in certain calculations. So my advice to him is play it as soon as possible. It is practicing a million games a day, and it's only going to get worse. That is it. Any questions?
I take some comfort in the notion that the human player has learned from playing the machine, that they may not completely dominate us, but like, oh, that's interesting. And we've gotten better as they've challenged us.
That's right. Maybe we can keep up a little bit. It's really interesting to me. Go is a game where there's sort of all this ancient knowledge that's just kind of handed down and you accept it as words from on high. And AlphaGo's challenged a couple of those things. That fourth line being the golden line, maybe that's not quite as true as we thought it was. And it's interesting to see that it violates those rules, and it's obviously not afraid to ignore the proverbs. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.